To understand the human excretory system, we first need to define three biological processes. Excretion is the specific removal of nitrogenous waste. This is different from egestion, which is the elimination of undigested food. Finally, osmoregulation is the precise balancing of excess water and salts in the body. Animals fall into three categories based on the type of waste they excrete. Ammotelic organisms excrete highly toxic ammonia, requiring massive amounts of water, so they are mostly aquatic. Ureotelic organisms, like humans, excrete moderately toxic urea, requiring less water. Uricotelic organisms, like birds, excrete uric acid, which is the least toxic and conserves the maximum amount of water. Moving up the evolutionary ladder, invertebrates develop distinct structures to handle these tasks. Flatworms use simple flame cells, earthworms utilize tubular nephridia, and insects rely on Malpighian tubules. Whether an organism converts waste to ammonia, urea, or uric acid determines exactly how much water they lose in the process. Their specific method of excretion dictates their daily water requirements, ultimately deciding exactly where they can survive on Earth. In humans, this entire process is centralized in the kidneys. These are reddish-brown, bean-shaped organs divided into two primary zones, the outer cortex and the inner medulla. Inside the medulla, you will find triangular structures called the medullary pyramids, which have a distinct striated appearance. The portions of the cortex that extend down between these pyramids are called the columns of Bertini, which lead down to the renal papillae at the base. Waste travels a specific physical pathway to exit this structure. From the papillae, fluid drains into the minor and major calyces, pools in the wide central cavity called the pelvis, and exits through the hilum to travel down the ureter. The kidney's gross anatomy reveals a highly organized series of pressurized funnels built to channel toxic waste out of the body with maximum efficiency. The actual work happens at the microscopic level. Each kidney contains about 1 million functional units called nephrons. The nephron is a continuous tube starting with the cup-shaped Bowman's capsule, leading into the proximal convoluted tubule, dipping down into the loop of Henle, and rising into the distal convoluted tubule. Multiple nephrons empty into a single collecting duct. To function, the nephron requires intense pressure. Blood enters the glomerulus inside Bowman's capsule through a broad afferent arteriole, but it exits through a much narrower efferent arteriole. Pushing blood from a wide pipe into a narrow one generates a massive pressure spike. After exiting the glomerulus, that efferent arteriole wraps entirely around the tubules, forming a web of peritubular capillaries and a specialized capillary network called the vasa recta that runs parallel to the loop of Henle. This intertwined network of tubes and blood vessels creates the massive surface area required to execute precise chemical filtration at high speeds. While the kidneys process waste, they do not manufacture it. Urea is created in the liver through a biochemical pathway called the ornithine cycle. The kidneys simply filter that pre-existing waste out of the bloodstream. That filtration happens in 3 steps. Step 1 is ultrafiltration. The high pressure inside the glomerulus forces blood plasma through 3 strict barriers: the endothelium, the basement membrane, and specialized cells called podocytes, which have narrow slit pores. This physical sieve produces 180 liters of raw filtrate every day. Before moving on, lock in the anatomy of that barrier. The 3 layers are the endothelium, the basement membrane, and the podocytes. Since we only produce about 2 liters of urine a day, the rest of that fluid goes through step 2, reabsorption, where useful substances like glucose and water are pulled back into the blood. Step 3 is tubular secretion, where the blood actively pumps remaining wastes, like potassium and ammonia, directly back into the nephron. Water reabsorption is driven by the countercurrent mechanism. The fluids inside the loop of Henle and the surrounding vasa recta flow in opposite directions. This dynamic creates a steep concentration gradient in the kidney tissue, shifting the osmolarity from 300 up to 1200. This hypertonic environment pulls water and salts out of the tubules. Without this specific countercurrent mechanism to aggressively reclaim water from the filtrate, terrestrial mammals would quickly dehydrate and die on land. Urine formation fluctuates based on the body's real-time needs, controlled by hormonal cascades. When you sweat and blood osmolarity rises, the hypothalamus triggers the pituitary to release ADH. This hormone forces the distal tubules to reabsorb more water, preventing excessive fluid loss. If your blood pressure drops, the RAS pathway activates. Specialized macula densa cells detect the pressure drop and signal juxtaglomerular cells in the kidney to release an enzyme called renin. Renin meets angiotensinogen from the liver and converts it to angiotensin 1. As that travels through the lungs, an enzyme called ACE converts it again, creating the potent vasoconstrictor angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 then triggers the adrenal cortex to release aldosterone. This hormone pulls sodium back into the blood, dragging water with it, increasing blood volume and raising your blood pressure back to normal. If blood pressure gets too high, the system has an antagonist. The muscle walls of the heart stretch and release atrial natriuretic factor, or ANF. This hormone actively suppresses the entire RAS system, promoting sodium and water loss to lower the pressure. Urine production operates as a real-time response to a master communication network spanning the brain, heart, and lungs. Urine travels down ureters to the bladder, featuring a fundus, body, neck, trigone base, and involuntary detrusor muscles. At 350 to 500 milliliters, stretch receptors signal the central nervous system, which sends motor impulses back to contract muscles and relax sphincters, the micturition reflex. Beyond processing waste and managing fluid, the kidneys serve another crucial function. If you travel to high altitudes, the drop in atmospheric pressure limits the amount of oxygen your blood can carry, creating a condition called hypoxia. The kidneys constantly monitor blood oxygen levels. When they detect this hypoxia, they secrete a hormone called erythropoietin. This travels directly to your bone marrow, stimulating it to produce millions of new red blood cells to compensate for the thin air. By dictating blood pressure, hydration, and oxygen capacity, the excretory system functions as the primary architect of our internal environment.